I know you talked about it on Rania's show, but the supposed darling of the so-called squad, the one who people were tripping over themselves, praising because she's finally like part of the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, having this huge position in the Democratic Party, and she's going to be the opposition. She's going to change the party from the inside, right? That old adage. What did she do at the DNC, and why is it concerning?
Yeah, she spoke at the Democratic National Committee. She's the young face, supposedly, of millennials or Gen Z or whatever it is. She's a person of color. She's supposed to bring the young progressive people to the party. There's a short clip of her speech that has been circulating. Just a few seconds. Let's watch it.
She is working tirelessly to secure a ceasefire in Gaza and bringing hostages home.
Yeah. So she said she is
like
working.
Hillary Clinton. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I didn't. I mean, it's uncanny.
It's weird.
Yeah. But she's talking about Kamala Harris, and she says she is working tirelessly to bring a ceasefire in Gaza, which is an outright lie. I mean, there's no evidence that Kamala Harris is doing anything at all to bring about a ceasefire. Kamala Harris has rejected the one thing that could bring about a ceasefire, which is an end to U.S. arms shipments to Israel. In fact, Kamala Harris has specifically rejected this, and you can see that in this statement from her top national security advisor, Phil Gordon. That was earlier this month, and you can see he says there that she, Kamala Harris, does not support an arms embargo on Israel. And then if we another, avatar of the so-called progressive wing of the Democratic Party is Senator Bernie Sanders. Let's take a look at a clip of what he said at the Democratic National Convention this week.
Must end this horrific war in Gaza. Bring home the hostages and demand an immediate ceasefire.
Okay.
Demand a ceasefire from whom, Bernie?
Right.
From which party is in power right now?
Yes, and notice what he left out. And it's the same as what AOC left out, and it's the same as what the platform leaves out, which is that they're both calling for a ceasefire, but the demand, as you noted, Nora, is not directed at anyone. They're not demanding that President Biden impose a ceasefire, and they're not directing any demand at the Democratic Party or the administration for an arms embargo. It is really just gesturing and virtue signaling in the hope that them just saying the magic word ceasefire will make us all forget about the daily ongoing massacres Israel is committing with the bombs the Democratic administration is airlifting to Israel night and day. And they are completely on message with what is coming out of the State Department from Secretary of State Blinken's talking points, which try to position or reposition the Democratic Party, which is the ruling party in the United States, and the Biden-Harris administration not as direct participants in this genocide, which of course they are, but rather as hapless bystanders and even neutral mediators. So let's take a look at this tweet from the State Department that just shows the similarity of the messaging. This is what I want to point out. You can almost hear Bernie reading this. It's time for this war to end. And in the tweet at the top, they talk about, I think they mentioned the word, they use the word ceasefire. So again,
it's time for it to end, as if 200,000 or more people killed by this genocide was okay. That's the implicit message there being sent.
That's right.
Yeah. And who are they appealing to here? They're the ones sending the bombs.
Yeah.
You
this is from Biden. This is Biden.
Yeah.
who, you know, who, like, someone always points out on Twitter every few weeks. It's like Biden, you know, states these platitudes, whatever, as though he's like, you know, who's the president here? I'd like to have a word with him, as though he's not the one directly sending the weapons to shred the people for the, you know, the suffering that he supposedly wants to stop.
100%.
And as though Israel hasn't said just in the last couple of days that they will not accept a ceasefire if it means ceasing the fire on Gaza. So it's not Hamas or the Palestinians that are being obstructionist. It has always been Israel and the U.S. State Department providing.
Right. But there's something very interesting going on here, because the Democrats aren't stupid. The DNC are not stupid. They spend millions of dollars, tens of millions, hundreds of millions on political consultants, on poll testing, on focus groups and everything. And think back to the beginning of this genocide, when we were saying ceasefire, say ceasefire, Bernie, demand a ceasefire. And remember, there was even that reporting that State Department and Biden administration officials had been instructed not to use the word ceasefire. And the word went out to the American clients and vassals. Some people might remember that clip of Justin Trudeau, the governor of Canada, of America's Canadian state of Canada, when he said we need he started to say the word ceasefire, and then he remembered the instruction: you're not allowed to say the word ceasefire. So they came up with all of these different words like humanitarian pause and I don't know what, just not to say ceasefire. Then they figured it out. Well, we'll just say ceasefire, but we'll empty it of any meaning. So now they won't stop saying ceasefire. But what they won't do is attach to that, like it's just you throw it into the sea. We want a ceasefire. We want a ceasefire. We wish we knew who is responsible for all this, and we only wish they would bring about a ceasefire. So that's why, and I said this yesterday on Rania's show, the demand has to be very specific. It's not a ceasefire alone. It is a ceasefire that can only be brought about by ending the day and night 24/7 flow of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden bombs to Israel. That's what will bring about a ceasefire within days, if not sooner. That's what would do it. And that's the thing that is totally absent. So it's absent from the platform. It's absent from any of their speeches. And on the contrary, the only thing they are promising is we will continue sending Israel billion upon billion upon billion worth of weapons. So it's important to note that bait and switch. And I'll just say one more thing on the ceasefire, because the really what it has become is, and this is very clear from looking at the diplomacy, the back and forth, the constant rounds of negotiations and proposals, and Antony Blinken going back and forth, and Qatar and Egypt as mediators and so on. The Biden-Harris administration and Netanyahu have exactly the same goal with these so-called negotiations, which is to have negotiations for the sake of negotiations, not to achieve a result. Why is that? It's because the Democrats want to make this issue go away. So they are trying to turn this into like an endless process. Oh, you don't like all the killing? Well, we support a ceasefire. Kamala Harris is even trying to bring about a ceasefire. The State Department is tweeting that it wants a ceasefire. Nobody wants a ceasefire more than we do. It's become like the two-state solution. This slogan. You say, well, you don't like what Israel is doing, but we want a two-state solution, and we're yearning for that, and we're working for that, and maybe in a few decades' time there'll be a two-state solution.
The peace process, the ceasefire process.
Yeah.
The ceasefire process, exactly, Asa. That's such a great way to put it. And then for Israel, of course, the negotiations are simply a way for Netanyahu in particular to alleviate both domestic and international pressure, and that's an old Israeli trick. And within Israel, it's very clear. Like just while we were on air, the Families Forum of the Israeli prisoners of war and captives in Gaza said we're boycotting the official government event commemorating them or calling for their release, because this government does not want them to come home and continues to kill them. So I just want to emphasize to people, the Democratic Party is on the side of genocide. Kamala Harris is on the side of genocide. Many people are smart and listen, and I learn from people's interpretations. It's important to listen to what they're saying carefully and to read carefully between the lines and not to be taken in by buzzword. Sadly, what it's become, just a buzzword like ceasefire, or the language of empathy about Palestinian suffering, which is just, as you said, Nora, it's a natural disaster. No, they're inflicting the suffering. They're sending the bombs. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are blowing Palestinian babies apart. They can stop it. They refuse to do it. And they want you to go away and stop asking them anything from them. All they want is their votes so they can continue murdering Palestinians, helping Israel murder Palestinians, and sow chaos and war around the world. That's what they want from you. Are they, quote, better or worse than Donald Trump? Well, again, as we saw, the Democrats want you to believe, because it's in writing in their platform, that they are more warmongering than Donald Trump. I'm not telling you who to vote for. I'm not saying who to vote for, but be informed. And this is the reality.
And AOC is on the side of genocide as well.
100%.
I want to say one thing about AOC, which is that, you know, I think a lot of people now are a bit more aware to just the sheer fakery of her whole candidacy as this supposed progressive politician who's now openly in the same trench of genocide. And I just want to say that we at the Electronic Intifada told you so. I tweeted earlier today on Twitter saying that I hated AOC before it was cool, and I was looking back at my old tweets, and I'm reminded that, Ali, that back in 2020 you wrote an article called "Why is AOC Honoring an Israeli War Criminal?" And even back then, she intended, there was this whole, you know, people can go back and read the article. There was this Israel lobby event which was set to honor Yitzhak Rabin, you know, who infamously ordered Israeli troops to break the bones of Palestinian children during the first Intifada. You know, this Israeli war criminal, former general, and so forth. And she was basically putting up this test flag at the time to you know, signaling to the Israel lobby that she wasn't going to be a threat to them. She was forced to back down after your reporting about that, Ali, you know. And she's moved so much even more closer to the Israel lobby since then. Yeah, thank you, Tamara. There it is on the screen there. Why is AOC honoring an Israeli war criminal? And there was a lot of denial at the time of people saying, oh, you know, it was an unfortunate incident. It was a misunderstanding. No, it wasn't. She was signaling what she intended to do. So, you know, when we tell you that these Democrats and these supposed left-wing Democrats and these supposed left-wing Labour Party people, for that matter, are fake, you should probably believe us.
It's a good rule of thumb.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, well, we'll have more probably next week on the last few days of the convention in terms of the protests, and I'm sure we'll have a brief discussion on whatever Harris says. So stay tuned for that next week. But Ali, I know you wanted to also talk about Osama Hamdan in the context of what we were just talking about, the ceasefire process, and how Israel and the U.S. are continuing to completely obstruct.
Yeah, just very briefly, because there's all this, stuff that's supposed to confuse us with, Blinken saying, Antony Blinken saying, and the US media repeating that the ball is in Hamas's court. And he just explained, Osama Hamdan, of course, is a senior member of Hamas, and he gave an interview to Al Jazeera yesterday, and he said that, Netanyahu and Blinken are engaging in, quote, a festival of lies and the sowing of fantasies, which I thought was a wonderful phrase. And he just said that, he said a lot, but just the key points for me was that he said that in the last round of mediated talks in Doha last week, the Israelis reneged on a number of issues that had been guaranteed in President Biden's proposal that he gave in that speech back in May. According to Hamdan, the Israelis now reject withdrawal from the Netzarim corridor, and they added the new condition, which is that they'll search everyone moving between the north and south of Gaza. They rejected withdrawal from the Philadelphia corridor, that's the border with Egypt, and talk only about redeployment, and they rejected handing over the Rafah crossing. And they have also made a lot of other changes in terms of the prisoner exchange, according to Osama Hamdan, all of which is designed to make any agreement impossible. And he reiterated that Hamas stands by its acceptance of Biden's proposal and other initiatives, the UN Security Council resolution that was passed, I think that was in June. And he said that we will work with any proposal or initiative that guarantees these basic points: an end of the aggression against the Palestinian people, a complete Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, aid and shelter for the Palestinian people and those who have been displaced and who have lost their homes, reconstruction and the lifting of the siege, and a just exchange of prisoners. That's the bottom line of the resistance. And I don't think there's going to be a way to achieve an agreement without that.
Yeah. Yeah. John, did you want to say anything about the, there was a proposal, some meeting between Egypt and Israel about the Philadelphia corridor and the Rafah crossing.
Yeah, I mean, Israel's violating a treaty with Egypt to be in the corridor that they negotiated after the disengagement from Gaza, from their withdrawal from Gaza. And so the fact, I mean, Egypt obviously plays a critical role in the siege of Gaza. That's always been true. But this is next level. This closing, the indefinite closing of the Rafah crossing, is a devastating reality for Palestinians to be navigating right now. The number of people that aren't able to get out for desperately needed hospital care in a land of destroyed hospitals. The crossing is, Egypt's been very non-committal on being on rectifying this situation of their agreement along this corridor. The Rafah crossing has to be opened. Israel being in charge of it indefinitely is a humanitarian disaster.
Yeah, and there was, I read something about how Egypt and Israel agreed that Israel could maintain a military presence on the Egyptian side of the Rafah border crossing if it allowed Palestinians to once again administer and operate the crossing itself. I mean, is that even...
I don't know. It's hard to imagine in this circumstance what it looks like, what Israel leaving the corridor looks like. If they're not going to do it in ceasefire negotiations, they don't care about their people. They're letting their people die. Yeah. It's hard to see Israel turning that over to Hamas, basically confirming that they lost the war. It's a devastating part of this conflict that crossing is closed, and Egypt has the right to demand that their demilitarized zone be adhered to, and Israel's doing the opposite. They're making military positions along that corridor again, which goes back to the 1980s when they made the corridor in the first place with the Egyptian peace deal. the first thing the Israelis did, the last thing they did, the first thing they did was to make that corridor to divide Rafah, Egypt from Rafah, Gaza, dividing families. So this is a long story on this corridor. It is a strategic corridor. It's the only way for Palestinians to exit Gaza because the Israelis don't let them through the other crossings.
Oh, we'll update as necessary on that. And one final discussion topic. Ali, is there anything else you wanted to say about Blinken and kind of what comes next? Every time Blinken meets Israeli leaders, a new round of massacres happens in his wake. What can we foresee in terms of Blinken's trip to the region, and especially, in the context of what we heard from Marandi, where an Iranian response is imminent? Oh, you're muted, Ali.
Yeah, we don't know if it's imminent, but it's
Right.
coming.
It could be, right, yeah.
Yeah, just very quickly, I wanted to highlight this story that appeared today, if we can put it up, that's in Middle East Eye and other sources, but it says that a senior U.S. official has criticized Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for making, quote, maximalist statements that are not constructive to getting a ceasefire deal across the finish line. So this is just, again, the Americans pretending, and I suspect that senior official was Blinken himself. And again, trying to paint the United States as the good guys, trying to pressure a recalcitrant Israel without really applying any real pressure to them. It's just a game of good cop, bad cop. The bottom line here is that if Joe Biden or whoever is running the United States makes that phone call to the Pentagon, to Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, and says, stop the airlift, stop the 24/7 flying of baby buster bombs to Israel, this would all end within a couple of days. Israel's totally dependent on Israel, but they don't want to do that. And these leaked stories, these cowardly leaked stories, are designed to make you think that Blinken is the good guy here, and that it's just, we just can't convince Netanyahu. Don't fall for it. This genocide is run from the White House.